Yes, what can I say? It's Thomas the Tank Engine.
It's Thomas the fucking Tank Engine!
The show has always been the big king of anthropomorphic trains based on the Railway series by the Reverend W. Awdry. In 1999, a movie for Thomas the Tank Engine was announced and was planned into production after Season 5 aired in the UK in 1998, and everyone knew what it was going to be called back then, and what it was called today after its release.
Thomas and the Magic Railroad.
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 Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Thomas and the Magic Railroad.
Thomas and the Magic Railroad was announced since its trailer, but a year and a decade later, it was released in summer 2000, 20 years ago. But after it was released, it was a critical failure and critics weren't happy. Fans, on the other hand, were mixed and divided into many different thoughts. Some say they still love the movie to this day, some say they thought it was okay, but would still hold a place in their childhood. Like me, I'll get into that later. And some fans disliked it, like Jeffrey Kitch and Diesel D199. Well, I liked this movie back when I had it on DVD as a kid, but looking back at it again, nowadays, it isn't that great after all. But is the movie really that bad? I've heard it was a bad movie, but is it really as bad as everyone says it is? Let's go into notes with the box office bomb movie that is called Thomas and the Magic Railroad. P.S. If you're those that never saw this movie, there will be spoilers. Anyways, on to the review! The movie starts with our introduction to Thomas the Tank Engine himself. He is a blue LBNSCR E2 class tank engine. Oh, screw it, you already know who he is and so do I. Then we come across Thomas and Gordon having a typical disagreement, but are rudely interrupted when Diesel 10 passes by at high speed saying he's got unfinished business to do, meaning it is to find Lady and destroy her and the Magic Railroad once and for all. Then we cut to Shining Time Station, introducing us to Mr. Conductor, previously played by Ringo Starr and George Carlin in the TV show, but now played by Alec Baldwin in the movie. And you all know who he is, so no other words. Russell Means as Billy Two Feathers, the Native American railroad engineer on the Indian Valley Railroad, and Diddy Kong as Stacy Jones, the manager of Shining Time Station. I gotta say, these characters seem more looking into detail when I watch at least 1 or 2 episodes of the Shining Time Station series. Oh, and before I go into further detail, for those that don't know why Mr. Conductor was left in charge of the Northwestern Railway in the movie, the reason why Sir Topham Hatt was not in this movie is simple. It's because he and his family went on holiday, being the reason why Mr. Conductor was left in charge of his own railway. Later in the film at Muffle Mountain, we find out that Burnett's engine called Lady is the engine of the Magic Railroad, a railway that connects with both Shining Time and the island of Sodor. The reason why Lady doesn't run anymore is because Lady was damaged by Diesel 10, and Burnett Stone can't fix her, so he just lets her rest in peace. Meanwhile, Diesel 10 has plans to destroy Lady, but unfortunately, it wasn't really fully explained why, other than that he just wants to be more powerful than he ever was. Though whilst it never explains why, I do love the part where his claw Pinchy whacks him on the nose. That's really hilarious. We are then introduced to Lily, and she discusses that the other real reason why his grandfather was so sad was because Tasha died. That I can give the movie props for giving a character a reason why Burnett Stone is so sad, because despite the fact that Tasha's death wasn't fully explained why or how she died, that is still very good character development for Burnett Stone. But again, I will give out some slack. Lily's mother tells her that a visit to Muffle Mountain would cheer Lily and Burnett Stone up. With the cheer-up present being a friendship bracelet, Lily climbs up and talks to her plush toy bird, Bluebird, on how much it would love to travel. Meanwhile, Mr. Conductor is losing all of his gold dust, which wasn't really explained how or when that remotely happened, other than it just happened anyway. I think that's a rather vague way of explaining how something like this even happened. Imagine the Empire Strikes Back not explaining fully on why Darth Vader wanted Luke to join the forces with him, despite revealing the fact that Vader was Luke's father the whole time. That sounds like a big no-brainer, does it? How can Mr. Conductor run out of gold dust within the first 22 minutes of the movie without explaining why? I get that this is a movie, but there has to be an explanation. Meanwhile, Lily boards a train at a train station, but instead she is directed to a train that is not going from Muffle Mountain, but actually going from Shining Time Station by a dog named Mutt. And maybe so for the right reasons. That dog must be really smart. Back on Sodor, the engines are discussing situations about Diesel 10 and Mr. Conductor, and Thomas decides he should look for Mr. Conductor. Birdie encourages him to try and have a race with him, but Thomas declines the offer, saying that he has to help Mr. Conductor. But wait, is that me, or is Birdie the only character who has a driver? Sure, Birdie's driver is not an engine driver, but a bus driver, since, get it, he's Birdie the bus? If Birdie's driver appears, then how come none of the engine's crew appear in the movie at all? No. We don't even see that many humans on Sodor in this movie. No train drivers, no firemen, no passengers, no other form of railway crew or other people. Nothing! Just a whole island entirely with engines controlled all by themselves. That is really noticeable no matter how inconsistent it is, in my opinion. Back in the other part of somewhere that isn't Sodor, Mr. Conductor is trying to look for the sources of more gold dust. He tries to find a windmill, but gets lost. He starts eating vegetables and says random words to get himself clues about a beach, where it introduces us to Scottish actor Michael E. Rogers, playing as Junior, Mr. Conductor's cousin. He gets a call from Mr. Conductor, who wants his help because he ran out of gold dust. But Junior mostly has bits of trouble getting Mr. Conductor's attention on the shell phone, but he mentions that he too has run out of gold dust. And like how Mr. Conductor lost his sparkle, it's never really explained how Junior lost his sparkle, other than it just remotely happened for the sake of the movie. Later at Shining Time, the train arrives and stops. Mutt arrives too and wants Lily to get off the train and come into the station. But nobody is actually here in the moment, all except one. Spoiler alert! Junior is the only one who was there the whole time inside the station. Both have a short conversation and the story continues. On Sodor, Percy and Thomas are on a mail run, but they discuss to each other about Mr. Conductor's lost railway. Diesel 10 overhears this and Toby decides to go after him to see what's next. Diesel 10, Splatter, and Dodge are having a chat about Mr. Conductor's loss of his own gold dust, and Toby overhears this and has made a plan to distract and outsmart Diesel 10. Toby rings his bell, Diesel 10 unintentionally wrecks the root with his claw Pinchy, the shed collapses on all three Diesels, and Toby gets away with his plan scot-free. That face on Toby really sums up the fact that he takes no shit from Diesel 10 or anyone. It really shows how smart Toby is, and not so cowardly and pathetic as he was in the Miller era. But anyway, that scene is just pure gold and quite clever too. This is one of the movie's more memorable moments than what I was thinking it to be. Later the next day, Thomas is sent to pick up 6 trucks full of special coal for Henry. But the last truck rolls backwards fast into the magic buffers, leading to the magic railroad. Only now there are just 5 coal trucks instead of 6. Now this is one problem this movie did have. Henry had just got into his new shape. If any single one of you remember that in The Flying Kipper from Season 1, Henry didn't need special coal to run anymore, because Sir Topham Hatt had sent him to Crewe in England, where there is a workshop for steam engines and diesel engines that repairs a lot of sick engines. Well, back then it was just steam engines. So how can Henry have special coal in his new shape if he doesn't need it anymore? That I can see as a continuity error because, like I said, Henry isn't in his old shape anymore. Later, Thomas meets up with Percy again, but this time, only they discuss about a coal truck that went lost. Percy guesses that it leads to the Magic Railroad, and Thomas suggests that he should protect the buffers from Diesel 10 as he leaves with Annie and Clarabelle. Mr. Conductor meets up with Diesel 10 and is threatened to be fallen off the bridge with Pinchy on him. Mr. Conductor sees that the viaduct is collapsing, believing that his world is collapsing. Wait, his world?
I don't get it.
Diesel 10 wants Mr. Conductor to tell him about the magic buffers, but Mr. Conductor doesn't want to tell him, and instead he cuts a pipe on Diesel 10's claw that leads him flying into the windmill. After another plan had gone wrong, Diesel 10 is with Splatter and Dodge again, and this time he has another shtick called How to Stop Being Stupid. You gotta admit, I like how Diesel 10 gets his comeuppance where he bangs a coaling plant with Pinchy, only for him to get covered in coal himself. That part is very damn funny, and I love funny moments like this. Later in the movie, Lily and Junior go to Sodor and meet Thomas. And Thomas takes Lily and Junior to the windmill, leaving Annie and Clarabelle behind as he believes Percy would come and take them for him. They arrive at the windmill, and Junior, Lily, Mr. Conductor, and Thomas reunite. Junior decides to have some fun and he goes on the windmill. He flies onto Diesel 10 and ends up getting hijacked. Later on Sodor, Percy goes to try and defend the magic buffers, believing to himself he is brave as told by Thomas earlier. He sees Splatter and Dodge wondering if the buffers are the magic buffers to the Magic Railroad, and he returns back to warn Thomas about the buffers. He tells Thomas that they must get back to Lily's grandfather now in case Diesel 10 gets rid of the secret railway. Mr. Conductor asks Thomas if he can take Lily there. Thomas is unsure at first, but then he agrees that he can try. On his way, a tumbleweed distracts him and he proceeds to the Magic Railroad anyway. Thomas finds the missing coal truck, goes back for that coal truck, and then they later get to Muffle Mountain and plot hole alert. If Sparkle is one way to travel from Shining Time to Sodor, then what about walking through the magic buffers? What, you really need to go by train if you're a human to get to Muffle Mountain or Shining Time? Yes, it could take much longer, but it can still get you there, even by foot. It's like saying that there would be a secret magic underground railroad from the United States to Australia or somewhere around the world, except that never exists, and that is something said from me that sounds as it can be done on paper than in real life. How is it that Thomas or some other engine can travel through the magic buffers, and that Mr. Conductor wouldn't? Back to the story. Lily leaves Thomas where he is on Muffle Mountain. Thomas runs away as the soil and ground can't last the wait any longer. And Thomas runs into some random portal that might lead to another part of the Magic Railroad, I guess? Lily meets with Burnett again, who is happy to have Lily back, but still sad that he can't make her steam. Lily suggests special coal from the island of Sodor. Then we cut to Junior on Diesel 10, where we see James scared out of his own whiz by Diesel 10. Then Junior lands on him and loses his sparkle, which is not explained. James is at a dead end with buffers at the end of the scrapyard. Then it turns out Junior has extra gold dust left the whole time. Junior and James escape, leaving Diesel 10 confused, and both meet Mr. Conductor again. Whew, that was long, but okay. How does Junior go from having lack of gold dust to actually having the last extra? Did he just realize that now before he and James would have been finished off by Diesel 10 as well? Another plot hole pointed out. But I guess maybe I'm the first one to point this out. I'm not insulted or pissed off about it. It just seemed like a plot hole that didn't make any sense. Now then, back at Muffle Mountain, Lady's fire gets burning and then she gets moving again. Then Patch, Lily, and Burnett travel from Muffle Mountain to the Magic Railroad. Lady gains a face. We find out that she is voiced by the creator of the TV series, Britt Allcroft. And then Thomas appears out of nowhere, but just returns maybe just because and... How did this get so damn complicated and confusing? Why is Lady making those shavings? Why is Thomas going into some random portal in the first place? How can a cut from one part taking in Muffle Mountain, then going into Sodor, and doing another scene in Muffle Mountain again until Lady reaches Sodor? And how on earth does Thomas end up on the Magic Railroad with Lady? Okay, to make up for all that confusing and complicated stuff, we get right onto the famous chase scene. What can I say? I agree with every fan that likes this scene and says that's the best part of the film. This is one of those moments I always come back to Thomas and the Magic Railroad for. Even if it didn't have P.T. Boomer in the final cut, this scene is still great nonetheless. Now then, Diesel 10 is gone, the Gold Dust is remade, and we get our own magical happy ending. Whew, that was a really big story. Well, now that I have covered the entire story, let's talk about the characters. All except for Thomas, Henry, Gordon, Toby, James, Bertie, Harold despite seeing him only once and never again, and Percy as they are very well portrayed. But as for Billy Two Feathers and Stacy Jones, I am also excluding them as well. Even though Mr. Conductor is the main role of the movie, they aren't really the ones I will talk about, as I will be talking about the characters that get to be focused more in the film. P.T. Boomer is also another exclusion from this section here, because I of course would agree if the final version has P.T. Boomer as the main villain in the final version, it would make sense more. But because he was cut from the final version, he isn't going to be talked about other than the fact he was cut off. So let's talk about the characters right now. Lady is the first character introduced in the movie to talk about. Despite being the engine that was only deceased in the start until when she starts traveling from Muffle Mountain and into Sodor, her class is really great to look at and I like the colors chosen for her. Red for her livery, gold for the buffers, side rod, smoke box, whistle, funnel top, dome, lining, and her nameplate on each side that says Lady, but black for her running board, front and back. I can't tell if her official livery is supposed to be purple, but according to the Thomas Wiki, it's stated that her livery is actually red-violet, so there's your answer. Anyways, I quite like the character myself. She may not have other traits except in Calling All Engines, where she is portrayed as moralistic in one scene where she works with Rusty, and she tells Thomas in his dream that everyone must work together, steam or diesel. But she is an at least tolerable plot device character. Heck, I prefer her over Proteus any day. Though you gotta admit, she does make for good merchandise back when the movie was selling great merchandise relating to Tomy, Wooden Railway, Ertl, etc. Mr. Conductor is portrayed perfectly. Alec Baldwin is the perfect Mr. Conductor for this film. And yes, you can argue he overacts in this movie. Well yeah, but Alec Baldwin still did a great job as Mr. Conductor. To me, his acting isn't really that exaggerated. No other words, but his portrayal in Magic Railroad is great. It shows that Baldwin had more energy in this movie and in Season 5 than he did over...
Stop being pushy, Donald snapped. Don't call me pushy, Douglas snapped back. You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart, huffed Donald.
Oh! How he did in Season 6. Burnett Stone is kind of an interesting character to begin with. Though yes, I see that Peter Fonda's performance did look pretty depressing, but to me, his portrayal is okay. It's just the acting part that needs some work. But you gotta feel sympathy for this guy on how his backstory explains how Lady was damaged by Diesel 10 and how his wife Tasha died, despite not being explained why. Lily Stone, on the other hand, is an okay character. I do like that she can help Burnett out on trying to get Lady to work again, no matter how pessimistic and miserable Burnett is. But I have to agree that Mara Wilson really underacts, judging by the fact that she wasn't really trying in this movie, as how she tried in the 1996 movie Matilda. One of the few 90s movie favorites of mine, alongside The Lion King, Looney Tunes Space Jam, Jurassic Park, Home Alone, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Aladdin, Nightmare Before Christmas, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, The Sandlot, and all that good shit. But even then, how can Mara not keep her mouth closed when acting? This just wasn't even a good way to conclude her performances in the movies, before she would become a writer. I don't have any disrespect for Mara, but her acting would have used some work back then. And another criticism I do have with Lily is that her character development should have just been more than, say, smiling and experiencing the magic. But despite her character flaws, she is okay. Not bad, not horrible, not a great character, just okay. Patch is one character who, in my opinion, is more underdeveloped than Lily. But I can give Cody McMain's credit and effort for playing the role as Patch. This character has little to not that much development into the movie, other than to help Lily with trying to restore the Magic Railroad, along with Burnett Stone. What is the purpose of adding him if he's just there for either filler or just being there for a few seconds and everything else continues without him? But all in all, he is well acted by Cody McMain, which again, I do give him credit. But as for Patch as a character, he's way more underdeveloped, so that's all I could even say about Patch. Junior, I think I have to pick out, is one of my favorite human characters, and not just in Thomas the Tank Engine in general, but is also one of my favorite human characters in Thomas and the Magic Railroad. The whole movie itself. He's got such good moments, good portrayal, and well-earned character development, like saying landing himself into trouble by falling onto Diesel 10's cab. That happened when he was flying off that windmill. Michael E. Rogers' performance as Junior is definitely why Junior is popular amongst all the human characters in Thomas. Why not another movie starring Michael E. Rogers? He's pretty underrated in terms of his acting career. Splatter and Dodge are pretty great pairs of twin diesels. They are Bill and Ben, except they are diesel engines and not steam engines. Though George the Steamroller was going to be Diesel 10's henchman, but was dropped in the final cut. They do serve a good replacement for George the Steamroller, and I like their voices given, too. And finally, a character we all consider to be the best out of all the Thomas and Friends villains, Diesel 10. Diesel 10 is by far the best villain in Thomas. He's way scarier and darker in terms of personality, and his personality in the movie was very subtle and so very well portrayed. I also like the voice acting given by Neil Crone, and this voice perfectly suits him. Because steam engines are cowardly, cranky, worn-out hunks of metal that couldn't hurt a fly! Oh, that voice impression I did was pretty funny. He is definitely the highlight of the movie. He has funny moments like his claw pinchy hitting him in the nose and him going for his little thing called How to Stop Being Stupid. He is really one of the best characters in the movie. I'm not gonna lie. And I wonder what it would be like if he returned to the main show after the Brenner era. Because we all know this was the first time we do see Diesel 10 in the main show. His design may be unrealistic, as that adding in something like a grabber claw would be non-existent, but also illegal in real life, but still makes him a total badass. He's threatening, but not to the point where he gets uncomfortable or is unlikable.